The human being is the only species of life on the planet Earth born into a state of history. All the others are born into a state of nature. The human infant born today doesn't have to begin at square one and discover fire, invent the wheel, etc. The human infant starts where all the generations which have preceded have left off, and that infant will add his bit or her bit to the awareness, the understanding of life at the present for the advantage of life yet to come. In understanding history, it is easiest understood at the local level. It's history that we can stand on, reach out to, touch, feel, smell, relate to. It's the history of the area we call home. It's important for all of us to understand that we have roots. It's important for all of us to understand that our local heritage is important for us to understand that we are part of this long, long human chain, generation by generation, each contributing for the benefit of the generation to follow. We have a responsibility to protect, to preserve our heritage and transmit it to those who will follow. Living in Oxford in the immediate post-Civil War years would have found one living in a town of about 2,000 total population, almost all of it concentrated within the mile square, a town with dirt roads, dirt streets, yes, still bearing the names of the forest trees as they do to this day, a town with emphasis on milling. We had a grist mill, a sawmill. On banking, we had our local bank. On commercial activities, several stores, dry goods stores, a hardware store. This was the time in which the bridge was built, a time in which most were engaged in agriculture or in activities related to agriculture. The bridge had about it a symbolism that exists to this day of relationship to agriculture. The bridge would permit horse-drawn vehicles to move easily across the stream. Over the bridge would pass wagon loads of produce. It was the bridge that would tie the rural area to the small commercial community, academic community that was Oxford.
The Black Bridge, from all available evidence, was an example of a bridge that was built for a specific purpose, and that was to improve access to the nearby mill. And many covered bridges were built by a combination of millers and their customers who did not want to rely on having to ford a river or in some case, or creek, or in some cases where there was a ferry. The ferry wouldn't operate in very high water, and so therefore there might be as much as 2 or 3 weeks when the crossing couldn't be made. And if you had just harvested corn or wheat or something and needed to get it to a mill, especially if it was rainy, you wanted to get it there before it started to mold and had all the other damage caused by the weather. So crossing was very important, and people were willing to do what needed to be done. And so that's really the basis of that bridge. It then, once it was open, became an easier way to get to Oxford for people on the other side. Covered bridges were considered part of the good old days, I think, for very many reasons. Some very practical. They were important and for people going to work, going to church, going to a mill, going to a school, meeting their friends. The social end of it probably is one that most people remember, though. Something happened either once or almost daily on that bridge. It was a part of their life. It was a place where they played. In some cases, it was a place where they were married because of a sentimental, romantic attachment to it.
Well, this bridge in its day was a very important thing to the community and to its commerce and travel. We're told that it was built primarily to handle traffic coming into the mills of Oxford and to carry grain and whatever else needed to be carried to these farms and communities around here. And this was a wooden thing that made a lot of racket, and people enjoyed driving through it because they felt that it was saying something to them. And kids particularly enjoyed driving through it because they could holler inside that long wooden bridge, and it would holler back at them, and that was fun. And I have just been thinking back to the days when I drove through that with my own kids. In fact, we had a Ford with a rumble seat on the back, and they could be sitting out in the open and still riding through the bridge and making that racket themselves and having a lot of fun. And it's an experience that today's youngsters really don't have. And at least today's youngsters can get out and walk into the bridge and be told what it was like to drive through it. And perhaps that experience can be translated into something new if we don't lose that bridge and that opportunity for experience.
But my dad used to tell about Halloween night, and the little kids would be walking into town to parties, and he'd get a white sheet and a dishpan and fill it with rocks, and he'd wait at the Oxford end, and they'd come along, you know, spooking each other and telling stories and chattering along, and then he'd rise up. He'd go, woo, and rattle the dishpan with the rocks, and those kids would scream, and they'd run. They had a wonderful time.
Came close to losing it, and there were several different popular movements to save the bridge, to make it a place for sightseers, and that attracted a number of different kinds of response. And one of those responses was when a movie actor wrote to us and said, I went to Miami and I enjoyed that bridge, and I would hate to see it go. My name is Rennie McAvoy, and whatever I can do to help save that bridge, I'd like to do. So he made several testimonials to saving the bridge, and there was a considerable movie publicity about his career, and he tied in eventually with the long series in which Dixie Dugan, a comic strip character, made a visit to Miami University, and Miami was mentioned in every day's comic strips for about 6 weeks. And Rennie McAvoy was doing the continuity on that, so he saw to it that Miami was well taken care of.
I think the near demise of the Black Ridge in the early 1950s was well timed as far as preserving it, because the covered bridge preservation movement was gaining momentum not only in Ohio but throughout the country, and especially from Pennsylvania through Illinois, where the states that had a lot of bridges. If you go back into the 1940s, early 1940s, if a bridge was to be replaced in the period of World War II, it was going to be the quickest, easiest bridge to build, and it would not have been, even preserving a wooden bridge would not have been given much credence. The Black Bridge then in the early 50s, that was the time when people were starting to look back. They were starting to realize that these were not only sentimental gems, but they were architectural gems and building gems, engineering gems. And so there was more of an attitude, I think, at the state level to do something about saving it than there would have been 10, 15, even 20 years before.
Well, we began to realize about 1975 that the bridge was in danger of wearing itself out, and the roof was beginning to leak, and there was some rot in its support and so forth. And in all, it was high time that we raised some money for the renovation of the bridge, that we raised popular enthusiasm for it. And it looked like a good opportunity to have a community day paying tribute to the bridge, but also getting a lot of people together in a situation that was associated with the bridge. And since the north end of the bridge opens out into an area called Fryman's Grove, because it's a part of the Fryman farm that still exists, we publicized the Fryman's Grove part of it, and the Fryman family helped us to plan the event. I think Mrs. Fryman and her banjo were part of the music for the day. Felix Fryman, by this time, he was the patriarch of the Fryman family, and he was a member of the Board of Trustees of the Museum Association by that time. And so he took a very lively part in it, and helped us to get a grant from the county commissioners. He helped us raise some additional money. Since he was living across the road from the bridge, he took a very active part in supervising the workmen who were putting a new roof on the bridge. In fact, he got up on the roof and did quite a bit of the work himself, and he had a very close relationship with the bridge. As the need for this preservation and renovation has become more evident, there's been a great deal of interest in doing whatever individuals can do, and we've had work days out there that would be preliminary to some of the restoration work, cutting away bushes that were getting in the way of getting repairs done on the bridge, or to do some simple things that would curtail damage or head it off. And we've had a number of volunteer groups come out on that, and they range everywhere from Billy Snape, who, when he started coming out there, was about 12 years old, but already had built a model of the bridge, and is unusually conversant on the principles of construction of the bridge and what is needed for it. All the way from people that age to people closer to my age who will never see 75 again. It's been a good thing to get those segments of the community better acquainted with each other.
When Billy was in 4th grade, he was in my class at Marshall School, and he was an avid reader and very interested in Ohio history. Well, one day in reading class, I noticed that he was reading this thick book on covered bridges. And as I started asking him questions about it, I found out that he knew an amazing amount about the covered bridges of Ohio. And his interest sort of spread to some of the other kids in the room, and we decided we wanted to know more about the Black Bridge, especially since that was the closest one to us. So we arranged a field trip to go visit the Black Bridge, and the director of the museum came and met us there and told us the history of the bridge and some of the interesting stories that went with it. Then I suggested to Billy that he might be interested in making a model of the bridge. That year, for his Ohio History project, he had done a model of Fort Hamilton that was just amazing, and he'd taken it to the Academic Arts Fair and impressed everyone with his model building ability. So he started some research then and got information about the Black Bridge. When we returned, the kids were all interested in starting a fundraising project of some kind where they could raise money to help preserve the bridge. But it was a little late at the end of the year, so I was hoping it would continue on when they went to Stewart, and that it would be nice, if we could have some follow through and get the children interested and more involved in preserving the bridge.
On the ends, which is these panels from here to here and from here to here, are long trusses. It was developed by a man by the name of Long, and in the middle is a child's truss. And the child's truss is very common in Preble County, which is just north of us. So this bridge is considered to be a variation of a long truss, since it has the long truss on each end.
The bridge is one of a handful. of symbols of our roots. We dare not let those few remaining symbols disappear. We're advantaged by its presence, and we hope to see it preserved far into the future, that succeeding generations can have that same sense of identity with the past, and tie with the past that our generation has known.
It looms from cut-back undergrowth, the symbol of a simpler day, more than a span across a stream, a thoroughfare and haven both for ghostly travelers making their way as in a bygone misty dream, twixt farm and town and back again, in endless treading to and fro. They stop for rest now and then, or shelter themselves from rain and storm. Farm wagons drawn by patient teams, smart buggies swift as trotter can go, and folk on foot, farm wives to trade their eggs and cream, butter and cheese, and honey from their hives of bees. There are sweethearts here, their names entwined proclaim to the ages their deathless love, and revelers splash with happy shout beneath the sturdy beams above. Sunlight, mirrored from the rippling flow, dances in glistening, sparkling glee on the underside of the oaken floor, lighting the occasional angler's brow, where the daydreamers form in sweet recline. And still it stands in all despite, proof against the vandal's raids, withstanding nature's destroying might. Our delight in its charm never fades. Enduring through all dilapidations, its sturdy underpins prevail, a bridge in truth across the years to a past we cannot bear to lose. It comforts, protects, and shelters still. Oh, pray God, it always will.